Chris Rock. The name alone brings laughter to millions of people around the world. But behind that famous smile is a story of struggle, pain, and incredible strength. This is the story of a boy from Brooklyn who became one of the greatest comedians America has ever seen. Christopher Julius Rock was born on February 7th, 1965, in Andrews, South Carolina. He was the oldest of 7 children. When Chris was still a baby, his parents, Julius and Rosalie Rock, moved north to Brooklyn, New York, chasing the American dream. But life in Brooklyn wasn't easy. The family lived in a small apartment in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Money was always tight. Chris's father, Julius, worked incredibly hard driving trucks and delivering newspapers. His mother, Rosalie, taught at a preschool and worked as a social worker at night. Young Chris watched his parents work themselves to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. Some nights, his mother would sew torn clothes under a dim light. His father would count coins on the kitchen table, figuring out how to pay the bills. When Chris turned 10, the city sent him to a different school across town. He was one of the only black students there. Many kids didn't want him there. They made fun of him. They called him names. Some days, they even hit him. Chris never told his parents about the bullying. He kept it all inside. But something interesting started to happen. Chris learned that if he made jokes, sometimes the bullies would laugh instead of hitting him. Humor became his protection. What started as survival slowly turned into a skill. By the time Chris was a teenager, he discovered stand-up comedy. He would sneak outside comedy clubs in New York City, listening through the walls because he was too young to go inside. He dreamed of being on that stage one day. After high school, Chris had to work. He flipped burgers, mopped floors, and delivered food. His room was so small and cold that some nights he slept in his jacket. But at night, Chris would perform at tiny comedy clubs. These places smelled like stale beer and cigarette smoke. The crowds were small and often drunk. The pay was almost nothing. Many nights, the audience didn't laugh. Some nights, they booed him. Some nights, people walked out. There were nights he couldn't afford to go home. So he rode the subway until morning, writing jokes in a notebook. Sometimes, he said later, I told jokes to keep from crying. I wasn't trying to be funny. I was trying to stay alive. Chris kept showing up, night after night, year after year. Then in 1986, something incredible happened. Eddie Murphy walked into one of those small clubs. Eddie was already a huge star. That night, Eddie watched Chris perform and smiled. That smile changed everything. Eddie gave Chris a small role in his movie, Beverly Hills Cop 2. After years of hunger and humiliation, someone important had finally noticed him. Chris was 21 years old. In 1990, Chris joined Saturday Night Live, one of the most famous comedy shows in American television. Every Saturday night, millions of people watched. The pressure was intense. Chris had to fight for every joke, every second of screen time. During his time on SNL, Chris became friends with other young comedians. Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, Rob Schneider, and David Spade. They were brothers in comedy, supporting each other through the chaos. Chris worked on SNL for 3 years. When it ended, he went back to stand-up comedy, performing in small clubs and theaters across America. Then came 1996, the year that changed everything. Chris Rock released Bring the Pain, a stand-up special that took America by storm. He talked about race, relationships, and real life with boldness nobody had heard before. He told the truth, and he made people laugh so hard they cried. Bring the Pain won 2 Emmy Awards. Suddenly, Chris Rock wasn't just another comedian. He was the comedian. In 1997, he started The Chris Rock Show on HBO, which won multiple awards. In 2005, he created Everybody Hates Chris, a TV show based on his childhood. The show ran for 4 seasons and touched millions of hearts. In 1994, Chris met Malik Compton. She worked in public relations and was calm, smart, and grounded. They fell in love and married in 1996. They bought a house in Alpine, New Jersey, and had 2 daughters, Lola Simone in 2002 and Zara Savannah in 2004. Chris loved being a father. On Sundays, he would take his daughters to Central Park, wearing a baseball cap so people wouldn't recognize him. He pushed strollers, bought ice cream, and played with his girls like any other dad. My daughters, he often said, are the only standing ovations that still matter. In 1988, Chris's father Julius died suddenly during surgery. Chris was only 23. The man who had worked 2 jobs his entire life was gone. When my dad died, Chris said later, part of me died too. In 2006, Chris lost his half-brother Charles to alcoholism. In 1997, he lost his close friend Chris Farley, who died at 33 from addiction. In 2008, comedian Bernie Mac, Chris's mentor, passed away at 50. These losses changed Chris. His comedy became deeper. He started talking about pain, mental health, and the struggles men face but often hide. Despite the happy family, Chris's marriage began to struggle. Chris admitted he had not been faithful. The long absences, pressure, and exhaustion created distance between him and Malik. In his 2018 special Tambourine, Chris spoke honestly, "I wasn't a good husband. That's nobody's fault but mine." In 2014, after nearly 19 years of marriage, they separated. The divorce was final in 2016, but they chose grace over anger. They shared custody, and Chris bought a house nearby to stay close to his daughters. On March 27, 2022, at the Academy Awards, Chris made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. Her husband, Will Smith, walked on stage and slapped Chris across the face. The world watched in shock. Chris stood there stunned, but didn't strike back. "Wow," he said softly. He finished presenting the award with dignity. Will later apologized, both publicly and privately. In March 2023, Chris addressed it in his Netflix special Selective Outrage, turning the pain into powerful comedy. Today, at 60 years old, Chris lives in Alpine, New Jersey. His net worth is around $60 million, but he says what matters most is peace. His daughters are now young women. Lola studies in Paris, and Zara attends USC. Chris talks to them every day and never misses important moments. In 2020, Chris was diagnosed with nonverbal learning disorder. He talked about it openly, helping others feel less alone. He continues therapy regularly and still performs stand-up comedy. In 2024, he launched Everybody Still Hates Chris, an animated version of his classic show. He also donates millions to education and women's empowerment programs. Chris Rock's life isn't a fairy tale. He grew up poor, was bullied at school, lost loved ones, and his marriage fell apart. But through it all, he never stopped showing up. He has won 4 Emmy Awards and 3 Grammy Awards. He's one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. But more importantly, he's a man who learned that success means nothing if you lose yourself. Today, Chris Rock knows who he is. He's a father who shows up, a comedian who tells the truth, a man who has fallen and gotten back up. His daughters call him every day. His comedy still makes millions laugh. Because in the end, we're all just human. We all make mistakes. We all carry pain. Chris Rock chose to transform his pain into laughter that heals, truth that matters, and a life that proves you can fall and still rise. That's not just comedy. That's courage. That's Chris Rock.